Alright, the UFC 323 pay-per-view is this weekend, and am I the only one that feels like there's absolutely no hype surrounding this card? Let's get into it. This card is weird, man. There's some really good fights on paper, but it doesn't have that pay-per-view feeling. It feels more like this is a fight night. I swear UFC Qatar had way more hype than this pay-per-view does. I also find a lot of the fight placements on this card very strange. You've got Jalen Turner versus Edson Barboza on the early prelims. Dana White must still be mad at him for retiring and then coming back. And then you've also got Marvin Vettori on the early prelims, man. What is he doing down there? Stylistically, I think a lot of these fights are going to end up in decisions. We just know we're going to get Dana White in the post-fight press conference just spitting his one-liners. You know, that main event wasn't a barn burner.
Wasn't a barn burner.
We're going to get all the Dana White classics. There's also a couple of do or die fights on this card where some of these guys like Jan Blachowicz, Marvin Vettori, they're on a bit of a losing streak, man, and if they don't win this fight, I could see them kind of getting cut. Not to mention, we do have a lot of stylistic matchups where it's the typical wrestler versus striker fight. We've got Payton Talbott versus Henry Cejudo, and obviously the co-main and the main event. So yeah, this could either be a massive sleeper card or it's going to be an absolute disaster. But yeah, kicking off my main card predictions, we've got Jan Blachowicz taking on Bogdan Guskov. The main angle coming into this matchup, at least for me, is Jan Blachowicz completely washed up, or does he have one more good performance in him? One thing that no one has noticed is how is Jan Blachowicz still ranked number 5 in the light heavyweight division when this guy hasn't won a fight in 3 years, almost 4 years. His last 2 performances felt completely flat, like there was no power left in his hands, and also like he doesn't have that same hunger anymore. So for me, this is an easy pick. Do I go with the guy that is 42 years old, well out of his prime, on a 3-fight losing streak, coming off career-changing injuries, or do I pick the other guy that's on a 4-fight win streak, all by finishes in the first and second round, is only 33 years old, and has all of the momentum in the world? Obviously, I'm picking Guskov, which is a crazy thing because just a couple of years ago, man, Jan Blachowicz seemed unstoppable, but his last big moment, like his second most recent win, was against Israel Adesanya, which feels like a lifetime ago. That was literally half a decade ago. That's insane to think about. I do see this fight being a unanimous decision win for Guskov, strictly because Jan Blachowicz is extremely durable. He hasn't been KO'd since 2019 when he fought Thiago Santos, and I also don't see Guskov getting a sub here. The last time that Jan Blachowicz was finished in a submission was against Glover a couple of years back, and let's be honest, Guskov doesn't have the same grappling as Glover. I feel like a lot of Jan's recent fights have all went to decision, and they've all been very close decisions, but he's losing them because he's just not putting enough output out there. And honestly, for me, it's a question of motivation. Is Jan still motivated to get up every day, train, and then compete at the highest level of this sport? Granted, the light heavyweight division sometimes doesn't feel like the highest level, but you know what I mean. So honestly, if Jan loses this fight, which I do think he's going to, I could see him retiring, or if he doesn't want to retire, I could really see the UFC cutting him. Anyway, this next matchup, Henry Cejudo versus Payton Talbott. I just know this will be a fun fight to watch. We've got another veteran versus an up-and-coming prospect. Henry Cejudo, man, since he's came back to the sport from his first retirement, hasn't been looking too good. He did have a couple of good moments against Aljo, and then also did get that knockdown against Merab. But seeing Merab pick up Henry Cejudo like a baby, I haven't been able to look at him the same way anymore.
For the takedown, and he gets it. Picks him up, carries him across the octagon, and here comes the slam.
Going into this fight, I'm completely shocked that Payton Talbott is a massive favorite, especially considering Payton Talbott lost to Hani Barcelos, and it wasn't just like a split decision loss. No, he got dominated over 3 rounds in the wrestling against a guy that is nowhere near Henry Cejudo's level in the wrestling department. The reason for this odds is quite obvious. Obviously, Henry Cejudo is on a 3-fight skid, but when you really look at his losses, they are only against elite guys. He lost his comeback fight against Aljamain Sterling, arguably one of the best bantamweights of all time, and then came back, fought Merab Dvalishvili, who is currently undoubtedly the greatest bantamweight of all time, let's be honest. So 2 elite guys, and then he fought Song Yudong, which I don't even count that fight as a loss. Obviously, he got eye poked and couldn't continue, so it was, for whatever reason, ruled as a loss for him.
I know, but I can't see, man. He's
blurry, dude.
Which in my opinion, it should have been a DQ. Like, he got fouled and just couldn't continue. So really, he's only lost these 2 fights and they've both been against very elite opponents. And my main question is whether Payton Talbott is anywhere near that level. Personally for me, I don't think it matters. That's why I'm going Payton Talbott by a round 2 TKO. My main thing when I'm making these predictions and looking at fighters where they are in their career is seeing, do they still have that motivation? Are they still hungry? And Henry Cejudo is so visibly just checked out of this sport. You can see it in all of his interviews this week. He clearly just doesn't really want to be there. When a fighter goes into a matchup knowing it's their last fight and also being on a 3-fight losing streak, and that being the reason you're retiring rather than by choice, it's completely different motivation, man. Especially when you're coming up against a guy like Payton Talbott, who is a hungry up-and-coming prospect looking to prove himself in this division. Like, this is his first real test, man. If he beats Henry Cejudo in stunning fashion, he honestly could be 1 fight away from a title fight. That's how thin the top of this bantamweight division is right now, because Merab has just been dominating everyone. The reason I said TKO instead of KO is because Payton Talbott isn't really known for his one-punch knockout power. He's very similar to Sean O'Malley in a sense where he has heavy hands and can land those big shots and put you down, but then he gets the finish by following up with ground and pound and it being a TKO. Not to mention, I do think Payton Talbott's wrestling defense has improved a lot since that loss. We saw it in the Felipe Lima fight. He came back and was defending a lot of the takedowns in that fight, and even when he did get taken to the ground, he was able to scramble out of bad positions and get back to his feet rather than just accepting the position. So yeah, that's why I think Payton Talbott will win this fight, strictly just because of the motivation difference, man. Moving on to this next fight, we have Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. I don't know why, man. Is it just me? But I just don't feel excited for this fight. I feel like there's been no hype going into this matchup, even though on paper, it's genuinely a sick fight and will honestly probably deliver. I'm going to go Brandon Moreno via unanimous decision. I just think this is Taira's hardest test in the UFC so far. He's got a very strong record. Like, a lot of his wins are by finish, whether it was by submission or KO, so he's very well rounded. But when you look at Brandon Moreno, man, I just think he's got the advantage in all the skill sets in this fight. Tatsuro Taira was on a 6-fight winning streak in the UFC until he came up against Brandon Royval and then lost by split decision. But then also, when you look at it, Brandon Moreno, his most recent loss is also to Brandon Royval via split decision. I never noticed how many split decision wins Brandon Royval has. But Moreno just looked really sharp when he fought Usyk earlier this year. And like I said, I just don't think Taira's fought the level of competition that Moreno has been fighting for the past couple of years. Tatsuro Taira has a nasty submission game and his striking is very clearly getting a lot better. But one thing he does lack is defense. He's still very hittable. He doesn't get his head off the center line enough. And even though he's got a good submission game, I would be very surprised if we see him submit Brandon Moreno. I just really don't see that happening unless Brandon Moreno makes a massive mistake and gets his back taken. But I just think the skill gap as well as the experience gap will be the massive X factor in this fight. But yeah, moving on to the co-main event, Alexandre Pantoja versus Joshua Van. I can't believe how young this guy is, man. I'm older than Joshua Van. What the heck am I doing? Joshua Van is very exciting. He's a massive fan favorite and is actually somehow breathing new life into this dead division. But I will not be gaslit into believing that he's going to defend all of Pantoja's takedowns and somehow win this fight. I just don't see that happening. That's why I'm going Alexandre Pantoja via submission. I would say maybe late round 4. I think people are massively overrating his striking, especially in that Royval fight. Don't get me wrong, man. He has slick, really good counters, especially going low to the body and then back up to the head. He's also got one of the best head movement I've seen in this division. But naturally, when you're a very high skilled boxer and you're coming up against another guy that is also a striker with 0 level of a takedown threat, you're going to look very slick. But something that no one's taking into consideration is that when you come up against a wrestling heavy opponent like Pantoja and your main game plan is boxing, dude, that has the ability to make your striking look horrible. So obviously in that Royval fight, there was no takedown threat whatsoever, but Pantoja will wrestle and he will take Joshua Van down. For me, it's just whether or not Joshua Van can out scramble rather than just end up on his back and be held down and smudged for the entire round. That's exactly what happened to Kai Kara France. He got taken down in those first 2 rounds and was just not able to get back up, and that really took the will to fight out of him. In that 3rd round when Pantoja got him down to the ground again, he just gave up the submission. And again, I'm going to say it here, I think the X factor is the experience gap. This is Joshua Van's first big moment and it's the biggest moment of his career, man, where this is just another stepping stone for Pantoja on his path to becoming the flyweight GOAT. Let's just be real, man. Pantoja has fought much better strikers, much better well-rounded opponents in the past. whereas Joshua Van has never fought the level of competition as Pantoja. Granted, Joshua Van definitely has the youth. I don't think Pantoja's ever fought someone this young, especially in this stage of his career, but I don't think that's going to work in his favor. I think that's going to work against Joshua Van because he doesn't have the experience. I definitely do see Joshua Van rocking Pantoja at some point in this fight because Pantoja definitely does have massive holes when it comes to his striking defense. I truly believe that Pantoja's game plan in this fight is going to be to keep this fight at range because Joshua Van does his best work when he's in that close boxing range. Not to mention Joshua Van, he has his best moments when he's able to counter, so he waits for his opponent to make mistakes or to throw first and then he goes second. Where I think Pantoja's going to come in this fight, like I said, being very patient, staying at range, and then waiting for Joshua Van to go first and then get that takedown. And like I said, this is Joshua Van's first big moment in his career, so naturally the nerves are going to be there, and I think he's just going to fall right into that game plan and just end up going first every single time. And even though I do think Pantoja will get rocked, if you've watched any Pantoja fight, man, he always gets rocked, but this guy has a freaking granite chin, man.
Efficiency advantage to the striking, to advantage to the striking, to
So yeah, that's why I'm going Pantoja by sub. But moving on to the main event, we have Merab Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan. It feels like at this point, any matchup that happens in this division for Merab is just because he's already beaten everyone. So it's either going to be rematches or guys like Amin Zahabi who are lower down in the rankings, but you just don't want to see him fight Sean O'Malley for the third time. That's why I said if Payton Talbott wins this fight, man, honestly, the UFC might just say screw it and give him the next title shot. But I made a deep dive video on this matchup just a couple of days ago where I basically said that Petr Yan has no chance. Let's just look at the facts, man. Everything that Petr Yan can do, Merab can do way better. Don't get me wrong, Petr Yan is technically the better guy, but just like this co-main event, you can be as technical as you want, but when you have a guy that is pouring on the pressure and you have someone like Merab who has insane cardio, is constantly coming forward, your striking technique is not going to matter. Petr Yan has to make this a dogfight, and I think he's going to have absolutely no choice. Not to mention the mental game here is the biggest X factor. Merab has already beaten Petr Yan only 2 years ago. It's not like this fight was 10 years ago. Petr Yan 2 years later will not be coming into this fight being a completely different fighter. It's just not going to happen. Not to mention Petr Yan hasn't fought any opponents since that first Merab fight to really make me believe that he's massively improved his wrestling defense. Like, he hasn't fought anyone similar on the pedigree of Merab in terms of wrestling. If he had fought someone like Umar Nurmagomedov in that time span and beat Umar and was able to defend the takedowns, then I would be more confident in picking Petr Yan. But no, that's why I'm saying we're going Merab by a classic unanimous decision. My biggest thing for Petr Yan is if he can't hurt Merab very early on in this fight, he's going to struggle and the drowning will begin. Even if Petr Yan defends a takedown or two from Merab, Merab's not going to stop shooting, bro. He's going to keep going all night. And like I said, Merab is coming into this fight extremely confident because he's already laid out the blueprint of how to beat Yan. He's got that in his mind that he knows he can take his shots and beat him. And I'm not falling for this narrative that the only reason Petr Yan lost their first fight was because his right hand was broken. If you actually remember clear enough, Merab also came into that fight with an injury, but the reason no one talks about that is because Merab was the one that dominated. And in my opinion, man, Petr Yan has not looked the same since those 2 Aljo losses. Before he fought Aljo, he came into every fight constantly hunting a finish and looking like a completely different fighter that was just hungry, man. Whereas after those Aljo fights, he just seems like now he's happy to scrape by getting a decision win and not really looking for a finish anymore. He used to genuinely seem like the most scariest guy in this division, but now I just don't feel the same, man. Whereas Merab is constantly improving. He's gotten better everywhere, and I have to say, out of the two, Merab has improved vastly more than Petr Yan has. Merab has fought absolute top tier level of competition, former champions, current champions, whereas Petr Yan has kind of just fought down in the rankings, you know, being a bit of a gatekeeper for the division. I just think iron sharpens iron, and the only reason Petr Yan is getting this title shot is because, like I said, Merab has already fought everyone else and was on the path of rematches. This is literally a rematch. But yeah, man, those are my picks for the UFC 323 main card. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys do drop a like in this video and make sure to subscribe as well, man. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.